Yeah, interesting stuff. It's kind of, I just don't understand why these geniuses, these scientific geniuses like Mark Leclerc, who cannot make the simple correlation between the cavitation of water bubbles, and he makes a direct link. He says, well, this is exactly the same process we see happening in supernovas, which are stars collapsing and, disintegrating, dying off. Well, why can't you make the simple connection that supernovas are the same thing as these cavitation water bubbles? These sonoluminescent water bubbles are very small. They're inside the Earth. Every single indication points to stars being tiny, small. Yeah, it's pathetic. And this guy, I was watching this video, this guy, Mark Leclerc, and he talks about water bubbles, how it creates this cavitation, and how it creates this emergent jet that creates this ton of force. It's like a hexagonal chute or groove it can put into different hard materials and stuff. And he talks about alchemy, like how water, creating these cavitation bubbles in the water, can actually transmutate chemicals into different chemicals. Fascinating stuff. And he talks about how it's the same thing with supernovas. Well, yeah, supernovas are very small. They're up in the middle of the Earth. Anyway, let's watch a little bit about this.
They're powerfully affected by magnetic fields, and in fact, it tends to generate a very powerful magnetic field. A lot of these transmuted materials bear incredibly strong magnetic signatures. I mean,
So
even material that's not supposed to be magnetizable, like quartz, is magnetic in a lot of instances in these things.
that has such
So,
massive ramifications, magnetic quartz,
I
massive
mean,
ramifications. My question about the spiral and the sonomatic effects you were talking about, this can be an off-the-wall question, but it comes down to the flashes that people see when UFOs take off, instantaneous flash. It sounds exactly like that science, that they are transmuting the energies of the area and going from one part to another, and they're bulldozing through time-space.
well, I think the UFO propulsion and the Leclerc effect are one and the same.
Absolutely. And I
You're
think
creating,
the burst of light is that sonomatic effect you were talking about.
yeah, like these globes of fire that you see typical of a lot of UFOs. You're seeing heavy ionization of the air. That's why you're seeing the fire, right? So
Yep.
they're causing a very powerful electrostatic field surrounding the hull of the UFO. And then the Leclerc effect kicks in because all you have to do is be able to steer this thing by concentrating, the shock wave on one side. They're probably doing it through some sort of artificial means, similar to like what Hutchison was doing, where he's creating a zone of very dense electron cloud surrounding like objects, hits it with a Tesla coil that forces the electrons into resonance. What you see is levitation. So it's causing a reduction in forces surrounding the thing. And I've seen this happen with the Leclerc effect, that all the forces surrounding the crystal were radically reduced by the Heisenberg uncertainty principle to the point where it nearly erased the inertia of the crystal. And I know this because when you calculate going from 0 to half the speed of light in the distance of a millimeter, how does an object survive that kind of astronomical acceleration and not come apart? And yet that serrated edge that you saw on the metal plate was a series of supernova explosions that the crystal survived, one right after the other. So it was like it was insulated from all the forces surrounding it. It was doing right angle turns at high speeds, and now we see UFOs doing the same thing. That's because it reduced the inertia inside the zone where the crystal was, just like the UFO propulsion does. The result is the pilots aren't torn apart by doing a radical right-hand turn that creates a 10,000 G acceleration on the pilot that would just
While in an
turn them into
electromagnetic
jello.
environment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
while in an electromagnetic environment such as a planet.
yeah, think of hyperspace as being a bubble that you create,
Yep.
and that you're isolated from the outside surrounding physics because the Heisenberg uncertainty principle doesn't allow any of it to pass through that.
It's all about the bubbles. It's all about the bubbles. We're inside the bubble of the Earth. It's an energy bubble. bubbles created by the pyramid in the middle of the Earth. Why can't they see this?
Barrier. That's what's happening on the shock wave of this thing. It's causing reduction in drag surrounding the crystal, which allows it to accelerate. It reduces the inertia of the crystal, so it really accelerates like crazy without resistance. And that's how it's getting up to relativistic speeds in such short distances. That's maybe the most important physics part of this, that, in my eyes, is the reduction of inertia.
Yeah, Heisenberg.
Right. And when you have the reductions of inertia, and you look at over a very long distance in space, when something's traveling extremely long distance, thousands of light years,
thousands
you
of
are
light
using
years.
that hyperspace bubble to alter time and space.
Sorry about that. I was saying they're making this correlation between this microscopic study of bubbles, and then they're trying to make this correlation of light years, thousands of light years. Come on, seriously?
And go from one reality bubble, which is Earth, to another bubble.
Oh, he said it. Earth is a bubble, a reality bubble. We're inside it.
Reality bubble, which may perceive time differently. And with the Claire effect, you can sync at the elemental level of the magnetic frequency of that planet.
Planet? Well, it's not a planet.
Boom! Right into the reality.
Well, I think the Leclerc effect is going to be the basis behind, honest to God, real warp drive. I mean, this thing's going to create interstellar space travel. I mean, bring it on. I mean, this thing, if you create
March
the same
travel
effect,
too. He's like, this guy reminds me of Mark Rodin too. It's like they come up with these very fascinating concepts, then they try to apply it economically. They try to profit off of it. That's not what it's designed for. They're missing the equation.
sorry?
The arch travel, where they say you go in through the arch and come out the other side in another world, it's the same thing.
Well, in this case, I mean, it's different than a wormhole. That's tough to create based on general relativity. So this gets around.
We're still talking about creating, in theory, creating a crystal that can plow through time-space. There's a consciousness that can be inside that crystal, because consciousness and crystals go hand in hand. This is the next level of science and spirituality, shaking hands and agreeing that consciousness is a part of quantum energy, and how we begin to research after that.
Yeah, but where's the source of that consciousness?
That is, you could look an idea. Consciousness can be in a crystal. Well, it's going through all of those incredible effects. Like in that example, you have a magnetized crystal. You could have a consciousness attached to it.
Well, just to touch on that, because this raises a really important part of the original life theory, which is, it's one thing to be able to assemble the molecules, but the central question is, what's the guiding principle that's allowing these things to assemble into useful proteins?
What's the guiding principle?
Junk DNA. In other words, look at the interaction of the assembly of the crystal coming out of the bubble. There's 20 or 30 different forces that are subtly interacting with each other. And that interaction, which is very chaotic, is really what's generating the genetic code. So, I mean, there's something going on inside there that's allowing it to produce
intellect,
proteins,
intelligence. Where's that coming from?
In order to form life. And so, really, the central question here to go forward on the cavitation original life theory is, it's one thing to produce DNA, but it's another thing to produce useful DNA.
I hear that the whole concept of junk DNA is actually overrated. There's really not much any junk DNA.
In fact, I was going to do my PhD thesis on the cavitation original life theory with Worcester Polytechnic Institute.
Seeing the results are derived from measurements and not from actually understanding. Yeah. They make this jump from this, this micro study of bubbles, and then they try to make this leap onto reality. I don't know. It's like a leap of faith. They try to fit in the Heisenberg uncertainty and a theory of relativity, and no.
They were telling me, that they weren't so much worried about forming DNA and all that, but they're more concerned about proteins, because those are what really affect your body. And we probably would have done those experiments in a very high containment, like class 3 or class 4 facility at least, just to prevent anything from escaping, shall we say. So I was actually going to try to create life from scratch on my PhD thesis. That never went forward because one of the people who was originally one of the leaders of cold fusion in the Navy, Dave Nagel, actually dropped the ball, and we never ended up proceeding any funding to go forward, so I ended up not getting a PhD because we had no money.
Perhaps that was a blessing. You don't want to go into Dr. Frankenstein territory with all the other amazing innovations you're dealing with. So just to summarize for people, the Leclerc effect is essentially an electrostatic phenomenon, not electromagnetic.
Yeah, you're going to have that electrostatic field being set up. That's where the crystal comes in. If it was just a high-speed projectile with no charge, this would never happen. Because what's happening is that, because let's focus on that. I'll go back and show you a close-up here.
Okay. And I just want to point this out. The reason I asked this question is because in the entire quote-unquote alternative energy scene, everyone makes a big fuss about electromagnetism, and they still ignore electrostatics, which I think is more important, and that's really what Tesla and guys like Oleg Jefemenko, harped on for years. So,
well, in fact, that points out a primary difference between these theories. Let me kind of jump ahead and I'll show you. If you look at what people are saying as far as Pons-Fleischmann cells, they're claiming the fusion is occurring inside the material. I'm saying that it's happening outside, and that transmutation and the radiation and the fusion are all occurring right at the surface at the point of impact. So they're saying it's happening from the inside out, and I'm having,
yeah.
doubt about that.
Everybody's got their own opinion.
The electrodes are full of transmuted material. That didn't happen inside the material. It happened from the outside, and it was from the impact of these jets. So I'm saying the Pons-Fleischmann effect is really just the Leclerc effect.
The Leclerc effect. He coined it. It's the Leclerc effect. Leclerc effect. He wants to profit off of it, obviously.
Electrostatic attraction gives it a little extra oomph, so it hits hotter than it would if it just came out of the bubble and just slowed down and hit the electrodes there. And when you calculate the electrostatic potential energy of these crystals, it can add anywhere from 30 to 70% more energy to the motion of the jet than it had when it came out of the bubble. So just the fact that it's crystallized, you've already picked up this extra electrostatic attraction that will result in excess energy, even without the trench effect or the flare effect coming in like that. Alright, so this is exactly what they see in Pons-Fleischmann.
So why is this relevant? Okay, so basically he's trying to take this effect that happens in a bubble, this collapsing of the bubble, this cavitation, and it creates this shoot of energy or jet or so it's creating this thrust. So you're trying to apply it to what? Space travel? Come on. You want to market it? You want to capitalize off of it? Like a pistol shrimp? Yeah. I know what you're talking about, yeah. Is that what they call those? Pistol shrimps? Let's see if we can find something like that. Unless you got a link. Pistol shrimp stun gun, yeah. It's the same concept. Yep.
The pistol shrimp.
But it's funny that it all happens within water. Going back to, it says right there in Scripture, the stars are in the water. God was hovering over the water. The Spirit of God was hovering over the water, and He spoke into the water. The sound into the water creates the light. Let there be light. The sound reverberation inside the bubble, the water bubble of the celestial ocean, creates the light.
Is no bigger than your finger, and it's a crack shot. One of its two claws functions just like a handgun, and other shrimp are targets. When prey is in range, The claw is cocked.
Had a little Three Stooges sound effect there, didn't they?
Claw snaps shut so fast. It fires a bubble bullet up to 62 miles an hour. The bubble bursts and stuns the prey. It all happens in a fraction of a second. The fastest gun in the sea.
But is that the one that creates the light too? I thought there was like a marine animal or little creature that creates this little sonoluminescent light. Yeah, it's the same thing. They keep comparing these things to supernovas. Is it an anglerfish? I don't know. It's because supernovas are in water, up in the middle of the earth. It's like if it looks if it looks like a star, if it acts like a star, if it sounds like a star, it's a star. The anglerfish.
Here we will learn true facts about the anglerfish. The female anglerfish comes in many shapes, colors, and shades of ugly. It's like a rainbow of ugly. The male anglerfish is tiny by comparison, like a tiny little baby. He attaches himself to the female by biting her, and then digesting part of his face so he fuses with her flesh. He then atrophies, losing his digestive organs, brain, heart, and eyes, and winds up nothing more than a pair of gonads, which release sperm when needed. Hey there, pretty lady. Nice gonads. To the female anglerfish, the human male is a very loud, annoying, and unnecessarily complicated pair of gonads. The anglerfish is a master of disguise, hiding itself among the sand.
That's pretty amazing that they can camouflage like that.
Here, an anglerfish compares its camouflaging skills with that of a flounder, also a master. Holy crap! Did you? What the fuck? To hunt, the anglerfish waves things in front of its mouth that its prey is attracted to. Here, the anglerfish waves a lovely pashmina shawl, just the size for an unsuspecting shrimp. Here, another one presents a lovely pair of leggings. And here, a decorative hat feather. Sadly, the shrimps and their vanity pay the ultimate price. Death. The deep-sea anglerfish collects glowy bacteria in its wavy thing to create a tiny little light. Because it's dark as hell down there, and someone needs to light up that pretty lady.
And that's just amazing though, how the anglerfish, the octopus can transform their appearance to match their surroundings. It's like they don't have the intellect to do that. How do they know how to do that? It's like magic. Weird.
130 to 170% thermal efficiency. Well, that's because of the acceleration of that charged crystal in the electrode. Okay, so if you look at ultrasound, see you get the bubbles collapsing inside the chamber. There is no jet being formed, but the actual interface itself, I've discovered in a lot of instances, crystallized. So there's a little bit of the Leclerc effect occurring even on the shock front as it accelerates, just like the shock front.
The Leclerc effect.
So it happens to a small degree in ultrasonic collapse, and to a large degree in reentry jet impact.
Wow, so you just dropped a huge bombshell on there. You believe cavitation is the secret to cold fusion. I mean,
yeah, it really is. In fact, think about that result I showed you earlier, the radiation that had no core. So I'm firing cavitation reentry jets into water, and that produced more radiation than the core did, but less transmutation. There's like a balance that went on. So if you see more radiation, you see less transmutation, because one, sucks up the energy from the other side. So, how do you argue that it was caused by some sort of electrochemistry when there's no electric current going on? The By the way, the distribution of the elements in the electrodes in the Pond's Fleischmann cells ended up being exactly the same distribution that I saw with cavitation, and yet I did it without any palladium, without heavy water, so the common thread was cavitation in both instances. I produced 1,000 times the concentration and 1,000.
676, are you? I am Sunchild.
All right, but bottom line is it was the same mechanism that was at work in both. They just didn't understand they were generating cavitation on the face of the electrodes. They could see a plasma forming right on the electrode underwater while that generates.
You're not welcome here.
Wow. Okay. And for those that don't realize, cold fusion, those experiments happened in water. There were just 2 electrodes in water. So all this is happening in water. So what Mark is saying is very within the realm of possibility. Correct, Mark?
That's right. In fact, water, heavy water, and also solutions of water like deuterated acetone. That's what Taliarkin did. But the bottom line is you had to have
Deuterated
water present in some shape
acetone.
or form because that generates the crystal.
Water.
If it's not happening in water, then it's not going to happen.
Okay. I have a question for Noah, actually. Noah,
Okay.
you've worked with Gerald Pollack and Easy Water, and listening to this mind-blowing presentation by Mark, I'm sure like 1 million connections are fired in your brain. I would like it if you could share 1 or 2 of them with us.
I haven't really studied it.
I'm curious about the hexagonal structure of the water and any connections you might have noticed there.
Sure. You can hear me, right?
I can hear you.
Yes. Yeah, I was just refreshing myself with one of Dr. Pollack's publications, his recent novel or book that came out, The Fourth Phase of Water. And in there, he talks about a very similar structure of water. He points out that ice has that crystalline structure and suggests that maybe easy water, this bound form of water that possesses extremely unusual qualities that we don't associate with bulk water, that this is also a similar form, also hexagonal form, essentially, and that it has more of a fluid nature, and that it is able to shear and to break and to lose ions and to reformulate itself, very much in the way that Mark describes these hexagonal crystals that are able to break up and then reconnect so that they turn
She's trying to impress him.
larger threads as opposed to just a stable crystal that can't fluctuate around that shape. Does that answer your question?
Well,
Did I do good?
I'd like to add a comment, actually, is that the difference between easy water and the crystal is that the crystal has a triangle subunit, and easy water has a hexagonal subunit.
Crystalline has a triangle, and
More
easy water has a
smaller
hexagon.
volume and they're high pressure with my version of the crystal. But there's got to be interaction when life is being formed between the easy layer and the crystal itself. The two are interacting with each other because you can't have biological processes, as you know, without easy water being involved, right? So during the creation of life with the crystal as the template, easy water also came into play. And in fact, it's a whole unexplored chapter that I think maybe someday you'll probably add to.
I hope so.
I think that's where the conscious application of our minds
This guy's
as
like
they
a
observe it
sycophant.
begins to change quantum reality and physics.
But he's got to put in his 2 cents because he's got to appear smart. Nothing they have right now is a water part of it.
Absolutely arguable.
Hey, Matthew.
What's really interesting, sorry,
No, go for it.
is that here we have 2 species of water that no one's ever seen before, easy water and the crystal.
Hey.
And yet they all thought they had water figured out a long time ago, right now?
Yeah, they definitely thought that. And now we
Hey,
realize
Colin, how's it going?
less about it than we thought.
Good.
Absolutely.
More
One of the-
questions than answers.
Well, we know water is programmable. That's what we know.
We know that it's definitely susceptible to subtle energies, and subtle energies constitute cognitive intent and electromagnetic fields and thermal energies that are coming off of a living being or even a plant. Just being close to something else will entangle 2 things.
Matt, are you and Colin entangled? Just kidding.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of easy water structures that actually communicate. That's the work of Lucian you're referring to it.
Sorry, will you repeat that for me?
How much energy an electromagnetic field can hold? Well, they just like to postulate how smart they are.
Like, I think Monnier did some experiments.
Oh,
like
we were
that.
just talking about in water, cavitation in water, and the effects water has on other things. And this lady was talking about how, like, two different separate bodies of water can affect, one can affect the other. They can be entangled in a way.
Where he created the water memory, and they're separated spatially, and that they're able to interact with each other.
Yeah.
Bring back
he did
Tesla.
that.
Well, Tesla's probably reincarnated somewhere.
There's several labs actually in Canada. Dr. Persinger in Sudbury at Laurentian University. They've been doing experiments as well where they're able to entangle two separate containers of water using an electromagnetic field.
Entangle two separate containers of water using an electromagnetic field. Interesting. Juan Kerr. He's probably stupid from all the New Age. Let's see, who would Tesla reincarnate to be today? I don't know.
The pulsed magnetic field that's patterned and presented around these containers of the water, and by introducing acetic acid to one of them while they're both under this magnetic field, spatially separated, they're able to induce pH change
Who's Elon Musk?
in the water that's not receiving any acetic acid just because they're entangled, because there's an electromagnetic field allowing for this entanglement to occur.
SpaceX.
So
And just for the audience to know, Persinger was actually Noah's advisor back in Ontario.
yeah, I conducted my graduate work with him.
Ironically,
No, Tesla would not be involved in any money-making operations. Well, maybe he would. Who knows?
experiments that was classically performed by alchemists was to look into water to see themselves. And what you were just saying is a way to see oneself as the conscious observer, and the water is programmable. And when we can create that special field of energy, which is through the conscious application of sacred, which is love, which is that background frequency that defines
Speak into your water.
how science and the conscious application of the sacred come together. That's our joining. That's the future. Why? We understand through the Leclerc effect that all of this is transmutable and possible. It's a matter of understanding it and devising conscious technology and the respect for it, because there's a great deal of respect for the radiation that can be done, how it could damage your world in unways yet seen, and yet could it be limited simply because we are beings coming out of the limitations of our past. And we can't have those same limitations in place.
I think many of us here would agree that the experimenter themselves has an effect on the water itself and the experiment. But let's not get into that now. I think we can all smile and shake our heads, nod our heads at that. I have a question from Facebook. Does the spiral geometry have anything to do with torsion field energy? Perhaps a heretical question.
The douchery is
torsion field energy means. Maybe you can define that for me.
That's another great question. Torsion is the name that the Russian scientists have used, really for the ether and such. But so
ether.
Maybe that's not the question for the time. I understand. We'll pass on that one. Another question by Colin Schmidt. What's up, Colin? In addition, the sharp edges of the metal have more electron density, probably attracting the positive crystal. I wonder if sound-formed bubbles would also give the same effect.
Yeah, anytime you form that crystal interface like that, because even the inside of the bubble can form a crystal layer. And I've seen pictures of cavitation bubbles that look like buckyballs. They look like soccer balls. You can see
Well, that's interesting.
on the outside of this. Is other people's pictures too, not mine. So I mean, it's forming that crystal interface at the final point of collapse. As soon as it gets above a high enough pressure to be able to push those atoms close enough together, because they're trying to repel each other, so it overcomes this really intense repulsion in order to form the bond. That's why you don't see the crystal ordinarily. It does form in nature, but it forms more often in my apparatus because the bubbles actually collapse further than they do in nature. You know, they don't. The jet ordinarily in nature will strike the surface and then disrupt the final collapse of the bubble. But in my case, there's a hole there, so the jet passes through, and the bubble collapses.
You like that Nassim guy? I don't like that guy.
completely to a dot and hits the maximum pressure that it's able to hit with cavitation. But you just tip.
I mean, he's so full of shit too about the Earth spinning in a spiral along with the sun. It's all bullshit.
You don't see in nature. So crystal will form 80 to 85% of the time when I'm doing
not that part.
this cavitation work. I see it all the time. Very common.
Wow. I have a question for you. It might be a silly question, but Brownian motion, you mentioned that in your paper on cavitation theory of life. Can you tell us where Brownian motion factors into the Leclerc effect? There's a lot of clarity on that in general.
Well, what I was talking about there is the fact that it's isolated from Brownian motion because it's going supersonic speeds. And so anything that's going supersonic speeds with a shock wave surrounding it doesn't feel the downstream conditions. So if there's Brownian motion trying to shove it around,
Brownian
the
motion
gradient doesn't allow that to be transmitted backwards on the thing. So the result is that it's isolated from Brownian motion, and it makes a nice straight trajectory through the fluid. But that's actually all I referred to in the paper.
Okay.
So
I have
tangent.
there's a very interesting, I'm going to take a quote right out of your paper right now. It's very interesting, and I really want some clarification on this one from you. And I quote, "It is interesting to note that a water-based 1 nanometer diameter, regularly ordered hexagonal crystalline re-entered microjet fits perfectly into the 1 nanometer wide minor groove of the DNA-B helix."
Oh, that's interesting. Put your hexagonal peg into the groove of the DNA helix. Brownian motion theoretical. Heisenberg buckyball crap.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. In fact, let's jump right to that picture right there.
Hexagonal.
So what you're seeing right now, there's the minor groove, and the major groove is the wider of the two. And it turns out the minor groove is exactly a nanometer across.
Nanometer.
Well, if you have a water crystal that's that size, you get a 1-to-1 correspondence with all the rungs in the ladder of DNA. So the result is that there's a place for the crystal to bond temporarily to act as a scaffold for this thing.
A scaffold.
See, these are the connecting points here. It connects onto the phosphates and the bases.
Well, that's very
and
interesting.
The result is that it's the perfect geometry to fit into the
1 nanometer width
geometry to go from rung to rung
of the crystalline jet.
These layers that are forming here,
from a cavitation bubble.
The thickness of a water molecule. It's 0.3 nanometers between each of the rungs, and so a water crystal happens to have the perfect geometry to be able to act as the template for RNA, DNA, and also protein.
Well, that would make
sense.
sense.
There's actually a 2-to-1 correspondence, like it jumps every other bond on the crystal to form DNA, and every bond distance to forming protein. So 1-to-1 for protein, 2-to-1 for RNA and DNA. All right, so it's the perfect crystal that kind of like, it does everything in terms of forming both the nucleic acids and the proteins, which really is interesting because it's kind of
It comes from water. The cavitation of water. It's like the play of the sound in the water, creating life. That's interesting. Very interesting. It's a testament of Genesis 1. Let there be light, speaking into the water.
Chicken and the egg problem. I think Noah could fill you in better on this, but basically you can't form proteins without DNA and vice versa. So which came first? I say they came together.
Wow, Noah, do you have anything to say about that?
From the isodecahedron. What's the isodecahedron? I know the icosahedron. The isodecahedron, that's not a platonic solid. Finishing off with the cube, unless you mean the icosahedron. Oh, okay.
I don't know if I can comment on that one. That's not exactly where my specialty lies. But I did note that that spot in your article as well, that reference, because I think you mentioned it in one of the papers of yours that I was reading recently.
That's interesting. Did you ever see my platonic solid concave universe video? Or I nest all the platonic solids together.
Recently, you point out
She's
that
blushing. Oh, you
UV
saw it.
entrants that could puncture a cell, introduce material into the cell without actually rupturing the cell, so that it would be able to maintain structural integrity and hold this new information inside of it and incorporate it into itself.
Yeah,
Which is fascinating.
there's actually a study that was done by a group at Duke Medical, and they unknowingly infringed on my patents. And what they were doing is they were using the double bubble version of my patents, where I formed 2 cavitation bubbles. And they formed a reentrant jet that they aimed towards the cell, and they injected blue trypan dye into the cell, and the cell turned blue, but it didn't kill the cell. So they put a 200 nanometer hole into the cell membrane.
Yeah,
and so
it would make
so
sense.
they did it exactly
Down to the atom.
step by step, the exact procedures.
Everything has a pattern to it. You know? Platonic solid pattern, Fibonacci sequence pattern, golden ratio pattern. Everything has geometry to it. Symmetry.
For doing
Yeah.
targeted drug delivery with that technique in my patents. So, I mean, other people are stumbling across the same thing. People in the cavitation field are just starting to catch up, and I'm a decade ahead of all these guys.
Aha! Pat yourself on the back.
So, just so people understand, practically speaking, this drug delivery mechanism, what could it mean? Just explain it to us.
I'm a decade ahead of all these guys.
Injecting, like genes that you need for gene therapy, for replacing bad genes with good ones.
I'm a decade ahead.
Genes into the cell without hurting them.
I'm a decade ahead. These guys are kissing his ass, though.
Want to kill the cell. That allows that to happen. So targeted gene therapy now becomes possible without causing a lot of collateral damage. And in fact, when that article came out,
Get the pass and go straight down to a FEMA camp. Exactly.
The editor,
But I invented the Leclerc effect with cavitation. Can I get a break? No.
chief, who's Gene Strauss, he's really famous. You see him in Scientific American mentioned all the time. Well, it turned out that he did a special editorial review on that, and he decided it was one of the most important papers that had graced the pages of physical review letters. The problem is they decided not to mention it. They didn't do a thorough background check in terms of the existing patents, which describe it exactly. So basically, it was plagiarism. And I told Gene Strauss that.
Of course, I care about humans.
And nothing ever happened because it's the good old boy club of Duke, apparently. And I put them on.
Interdependence. I need humans. They need me.
So, I mean,
I love humans.
Much interest in giving credit where it's due to these guys. That if they didn't see it in the scientific paper, it happened to be in a patent description. Well, one's prior art just like the other, so they're not number one. They're not going to get any patents surrounding.
You're welcome.
I already own all of it.
It's also fair to say that this technology, from gene therapy, could also be used to repair bones, repair skin, and generating the exact material that you would need for the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, doing tissue scaffolding and all that, where you can pop holes through to allow blood flow, vascularization. I mean, all these things are possible. Doing
Vascular surgery.
Yep, going in there and cutting away thrombus, and in fact, they use cavitation in catheters now. But they're harnessing the shock of the implosion of the bubble, not the reentrant jet. So I've proposed a whole new class of catheters where you can go in there and do microsurgery by being able, like a scalpel, being able to aim the jet and do it.
Doesn't that shaft in the quasars look like a reentrant jet of cavitation? Just wondering.
Peel off the crust on the inside of the veins, the arteries, even cell walls, and use it to filter the cellular material that's going through the hemoglobin.
Well, taking it to the extreme, imagine a nanobot armed with a little canister of positrons and creating cavitation bubbles and killing viruses and other invaders.
Yep.
And forming ultimately. Yeah.
As well as modifying your DNA.
I don't know.
Where you can self-repair.
Earlier on in this video, he talked about how he was exposed to a lot of radiation and he almost died. It's kind of funny that he would talk about like the benevolent healing effects to this.
Your body based off of your conscious interaction with the technology.
Well, imagine instead of catching a cold, everything that comes into your body, the support invader bumps into it, does a DNA check, If it doesn't belong there, it takes it out.
That sounds like a practice technology that any alien species that would want to come to a new world would have built into their blood.
I think that's ultimately what's going to happen in terms of, like, you look at how cybernetic people are becoming with time, and that's just another step.
Well, if anyone wants to leave this world, I'm sure that that's going to be necessary. I mean, we're not going to take our sicknesses there because, we're all a toxic world here. I mean, you can only imagine what our GMO corn will do to someone else.
Absolutely.
So we have other questions?
Yes, Mark, I have a question.
I'm trying to address my audience and keep these guys happy. And
yeah, I have another question for you, Mark, if I will. I've been, in reading your paper, there was one other sentence that really, a whole paragraph actually, that really blew my mind. I'll read just a short portion of it, and you'll get it. A quote: "Amino acids have also been formed from plane shock waves in shock tubes. Shock waves are generated by cavitation. In general, it is very easy to generate amino acids which can form from a variety of energy sources, including electron beams and simple heating." Tell us a little more about it.
That's the work of a professor named Ken Suslick at Urbana-Champaign. He's a sonochemist. He's discovered
Champagne.
All sorts
Champagne
of
has cavitation bubbles. Sorry.
in all different types of configurations, including small protein spheres, which he claims, could act as a cell membrane precursor to it. And so, it's obvious that through the action of sonochemistry, you can form not just molecules, but large...
Is it one from the lack of air?
On the order of the size of cell membranes, so they're thousands of times larger than the atoms and the molecules, right? So they're forming these large-scale structures like...
Champagne?
Cavitation is used to produce the things
I don't know.
liposome.
It's carbonation, isn't
Cell
it?
membranes that are...
No, he was talking about Champaign, Illinois, but I just thought it was a funny pun.
It assembles itself into these spherical proto-membranes.
University of Illinois, Champaign.
They'll put drugs inside of those and use them as delivery mechanisms to go past the blood-brain barrier. And so cavitation creates artificial membranes. Right now, it's a common commercial application of it. And so you look at the origin of life, you got to ask yourself, well, hey, if you can create an artificial membrane, how about a real one?
Absolutely. The implications for that, just seem absolutely amazing. Just practically speaking, what could happen.
Yeah, I can see analogies in cavitation dynamics where it does, like I say, not just puts the pieces together, but really assembles it all, which is the missing part of this, that you look at other original life theories and how far do they really drill in terms of coming up with the details and how it would have happened. The competing theories of life, one of the most popular ones is that life started on a piece of fool's gold.
It seems that with with the combination of transmutation, plus being able to penetrate cell walls without harming the cell, and plus the creation of amino acids and cellular membranes, and we're almost looking at like replicator, Star Trek replicator type reality.
666.
In the future, if we were to really embrace cavitation. Is that too
that's
far
exactly.
out?
Well, the number 6 is always prevalent in nature. Even in this cavitation, the crystals are hexagonal. Interesting.
Well, that's for my PhD thesis at WPI. They actually accepted my candidacy plan, and that's exactly what I was going to do, is to form life from scratch.
You're really taking it back to like the ancient Arab alchemists and like the Jewish rabbis trying to make the golems.
That's my man, the alchemist himself, Mark Leclerc. That's right. That's awesome.
You have to call me.
Awesome.
You have to call me Frank Einstein.
How about no?
No.
Well, he kind of looked like Frankenstein. Herman Munster a little bit.
Far out, you think?
No, and it's always been my dream to create life from scratch. So I'm right with you, Mark.
I think it can be done. They're already doing it right now.
Golems were ancient robots.
Scientific American this past month, there was
What are golems?
An article on the original life in there. In fact, it was Chris McKay, who I've had
Golems.
conversations with too. He's an astrobiologist back at Ames, where I gave the presentation. I didn't necessarily agree with what I had to say about cavitation, but kind of like took it with a caveat and thought, well, yeah, I probably added some of the precursors, but didn't agree with it being the central part of the theory, because he was kind of, in my opinion, too hung up on the smokers, at the bottom of the ocean.
So I've got our first, I got our first Facebook meme from this thing. Caveat cavitation.
So Andrew, what do you think? I mean, do we have like at least two heretics here? I mean, it sounds like
we have more than a few heretics. We're a heretical organization charging even heretics out there going, you're pushing the envelope. But this is necessary because exactly what Mark is talking is transmutation. And when people dissect this interview over a period of weeks and weeks and weeks and understand the spiritual side, which is the alchemist, which is information that's been passed on through metaphysics, it's the same thing. It's just done by guys who had a pump they made themselves instead of getting at Home Depot. And yes, they got exposed to radiation because you see all sorts of alchemists with radiation burns all over them.
Oh, sure. In fact, you get to think about it. How hard is it for the ancients to build a pump? I mean, I'm sure they had cavitating pumps back then, especially for poorly designed pumps tend to cavitate anyway, right?
Yep. Exactly, and they show it in their texts.
Right. So, I mean, the odds of the Arab alchemists having transmuted materials, in my opinion, it's 100%.
It's the philosopher's stone. It's whatever you want it to be, whatever it is you need to manifest.
The philosopher's stone, the phlogiston, right?
All of it.
I think the philosopher's stone might have been a porous stone that they were forcing, a cavitating flow through, right? Or was forcing it to cavitate because of the porosity.
A lot of it was fraudulent.
Exactly. Couldn't live on something that simple. Backyard scientists have been doing this. Whether it's the creation of gunpowder, which was thought to be a virility drug, and it turns out to be a different kind of virility for mankind to have. And now you have cavitation, which has been shown in alchemy over and over and over and over and over again. There's thousands and thousands of texts from alchemists throughout the 5th to the 15th century that talk about cavitation.
Cyrus T was an alchemist.
They just present the language different because they were hiding it from the church.
Well, the transmutation part of this thing is critical because if you look at the other original life theories, not one of them mentions transmutation of the elements, so it's not really a part of the other theories. But it has the right stuff. It's producing the elements, it's producing the template, it's accelerating chemical reactions. All these things are happening. Yeah, and it's all happening in close proximity to each other. I mean, none of these things, it goes into so much detail and depth in terms of this theory, and it's all very testable. So we're going to find out the answers to this because eventually all these things can be easily tested in proper laboratories. So you're going to see the answers.
So, Tech, last show you were talking about getting a GoFundMe campaign going and stuff like that. That'd probably be a good time to do it. We're nearing
here's
about
the money
2
part.
hours for the show.
Donate.
So why don't we
give me some money,
some more questions, or do some of that stuff like we said, like the GoFundMe and where to go to find more information for everyone.
Well, there's no GoFundMe campaign right now. We still have to work on things like that. But, I think the most important thing right now is to get the people into this, get Mark some feedback, get people really engaged in this, because this is a whole new world that Mark has opened up. He's not just one guy looking at one little thing. This is an entire new phase. So,
too bad they're just too narrow-minded. They don't understand the big picture. This is good to know because it helps solidify the whole concave Earth, the formation of stars, the celestial sphere, cavitation of the stars, the sonoluminescence of the stars, the advanced acceleration of life with the sonochemical reactions. It's informative. Oh, that's good, Savat. I'm glad I speak to your soul. And no, I don't ask for money. I want to abolish money. We need to abolish money. Anyway...